Greetings. All right, chapter 13 covers organized crime. What I want you to do for a moment is just to think about what comes to mind when I mention organized crime. What do you think of? And where do you get that information? Or why are you thinking of that right now? Organized crime. Is it something you've read, a movie you've seen, something going on in the news recently, a case you're familiar with? Well, what is organized crime? That's kind of a ambiguous term. Crime being organized. Well, one definition that your author provides is that organized crime refers to any group of individuals whose primary activity involves violating crime laws to seek illegal profits and power. So this may include, for example, corruption in organizations that also have legitimate business dealings. Also, professionals and public officials engaging in illegal activities, or any occupational group for that matter. But if we look at the definition by the FBI and also Albini, who wrote The American Mafia, Genesis of a Legend, they define organized crime as any criminal activity involving two or more individuals, specialized or non-specialized, encompassing some form of social structure with some form of leadership, utilizing certain modes of operation in which the ultimate purpose of the organization is found in the enterprises of a particular group. So here we have a definition that has a variety of components, but it also gives us clues to studying organized crime. And I would recommend that we use basically group theories and also organizational theories. In some sense, organized criminal organizations basically can operate in many similar ways as non-criminal organizations do. I mean, if you look at the social structure or the hierarchy, if you look at business dealings, communication patterns, power, communication structure. I mean, just looking at all these different dimensions, if you think about it, there's a lot of useful information from organizational theory and management that we can apply to organized crime. Your author points out that there's different types of organized crime. For example, he talks about the political social organized crime, which is more in line with terrorist groups or other social movements that would carry out violent activities. Then also mercenary or predatory organized crime, where crimes are committed by these particular groups for profit. And then in-group oriented organized crime, where crimes are committed by groups such as gangs primarily for psychological satisfaction. And then syndicate crime, which is the type of criminal organization that is mostly associated with what we call organized crime. And three major characteristics of syndicate crime are: groups use force, they provide illicit services, and they also provide protection and immunity for the illegal services. Also, you can see that we gain information on organized crime from a wide array of sources, including informers, court documents, the media, transcripts from wire surveillance, law enforcement and government reports, historical documents, and also memoirs that can provide a wealth of information as well. Of course, conducting research on organized crime would involve doing qualitative interviewing to find out a lot more information about how the crime syndicate operates and works, makes sense of their organization, functions, and so on. Your author also points out that it's useful to think of organized crime as a continuum. And then your author gets into different types of organized criminal groups. And your author talks about street gangs. And I think Klein's 4 myths about street gangs are very relevant. So these myths, these are some beliefs that the media or people may have that Klein believes are false. They're myths. The myth number 1, that street gangs are highly organized, cohesive, and have central leadership. According to Klein, no, that's not the case. Myth number 2, street gangs are all violent. Not necessarily. Myth number 3, street gangs control drug distribution in our cities. Again, Klein believes that's a myth. And number 4, Los Angeles gangs franchise drug distribution to the rest of the country. And Klein believes, again, that's not the case. So there's also a section on international organized crime with emphasis on organized criminal syndicates that originate in Japan, China, and Russia. Of course, there's discussion of crime syndicates in the United States as well. And then there's some discussion of theory and then the nature of organized crime, looking at, for example, money laundering, or a method of converting large amounts of illegal obtained money into usable money. Excuse me, that appears to be legitimate, setting up fake companies and using offshore banks and creating false invoices and the like. There's also a discussion on international drug trafficking, and then a discussion of syndicate crime in the United States and the different theories and some of the different patterns and the types of businesses such as gambling, loan sharking, labor racketeering, narcotics trafficking, and human smuggling. We actually have a couple courses in this area, a course on organized crime. We also have a course on human trafficking. So again, this is just kind of an introduction, and then if you want to gain a lot more information and knowledge, you can consider taking some of these courses as criminal justice electives for your degree. Also discussion about big business and government, and that's certainly a fascinating area as well. Very relevant to study the historical processes that have taken place regarding organized crime. Sometimes we have our information from the media or from shows. I always think of The Wolf of Wall Street because I saw that movie recently, and think about stock market fraud and other crimes that have been committed. Sometimes I wonder about some of the phone calls I get, if that's actually organized criminal syndicate engaging in fraudulent activities, trying to break into different computer systems, or if you have these organized groups. Once I got a phone call, and I answered, and I knew it was. I'm sorry, I picked up the phone, but I didn't say anything, and it was a call center, and I could hear the supervisor in the background just saying all kinds of stuff. It seemed that his vocabulary, every other word was a 4-letter curse word, but he was saying that, let's get more money, let's get them, let's get their cash, be, strong, be, get them to give your money. And I just heard that for a little bit before the phone was hung up. And I thought, wow, that was kind of strange. And so I wonder about some of these, where do they come from? I've started to talk to people who've been victimized by these phone calls in a variety of ways, and wonder where does the connection come up to. It's very difficult to deal with phone burners and being able to disguise a number and all that. Also, I know I had an interesting situation many years ago when I was a child, probably, I don't know, 8, 9 years old. I was walking around the hills in Los Angeles, and I got lost. I was just doing a hike, and I must have taken a wrong turn. And I remember coming up on this kind of cavern area, and there was a fire going, and there were all these men in vests, leather vests and jeans, and the vest said Hell's Angels on them. And they came up to me and they asked me my name, how I was doing, what was going on. I told them I was lost, and they said, "Oh, no problem." Then asked where I was trying to go, where I lived and everything, and then they directed me and walked me to the right path and pointed it out, and I was able to get home. So that was my first interaction with what would be considered a motorcycle gang, and it was interesting because that gave me a different view when all of a sudden I started hearing about, in the 1960s and 70s, living out in California, about discussion of gangs and motorcycle gangs and all that, and what was it, Easy Rider movie, and so on and so forth, and then a very different perception may change over time, and that's because organized crime changes over time. When I first started studying crime, we didn't have internet crimes, and that's because we didn't have the internet. But things are changing, and there's some new areas I'm thinking about, like nano crimes and other crimes of high-tech nature that I'm not even sure what they'll look like in the near and far future. Anyway, your author points out some different theories applied to organized crime. Anomie theory again comes up, where there's the legitimate means to success are blocked, and so these groups become what Merton described as innovators, and so they still want that success, but they substitute the legitimate means for illegitimate or illegal ones. And then also your author discusses differential opportunity theory, where organized crime is viewed as an opportunity for gaining social status, and also embedded within a criminal subculture which socializes the individual and then provides all of that reinforcement and feedback and methodologies of committing crimes and the like. And so we have that. And then, of course, again, I think the media provides a lot of information the public has, and then we have to evaluate that in itself. And this wraps up this video. Thank you.